Hey, and welcome back to Everybody Climbs, your adaptive climbing podcast series. This is a collaborative podcast, which is why I'm here on your Power Company feed. And today we're going to hear from Melissa Ruiz. Melissa has been climbing and competing for about 6 years. She's got 3 golds and 1 bronze national medal to her name, 2 silver and 2 gold World Cup medals, and a silver for the Paraclimbing World Championships. But recently, she's started climbing outside. And to put it lightly, she is stoked. In fact, this October 2024, she'll be teaching an aid climbing workshop at the Adaptive Climbers Fest in the Red River Gorge. Aid climbing is part of how Melissa has been able to access outdoor climbing with her disability, which is cerebral palsy. So we'll pick up the conversation as she's explaining her condition. She says you can think of it as fundamentally a communication problem between her brain and her body. Like when one person throws a ball and yells catch, but their friend doesn't hear them or doesn't know what catch means, so the ball hits the ground. Sometimes this happens when she's walking, she says, and so she might trip over her foot.
And that happens because the command where I'm telling my foot, okay, we're moving or we're lifting or whatever it is you tell your feet to do, doesn't reach the foot, or it does, but it takes too long. So it'll catch the ground before I have time to lift it. I've had it where I've gotten so tired that it wouldn't listen to me at all. And my leg is basically just dragging while I'm not quite limping, but almost limping. Things like that just kind of happen. It can be a myriad of things where the muscle either doesn't respond, or it responds in a different way than what I expected, or it responds almost too much or too little.
Okay, so I think that's a good baseline. So with that understanding going forward, can you start by telling us how you found climbing? I don't think out of all the times that we've talked at competitions and stuff, I don't think I know that story of how you started climbing for the first time.
That story it's interesting. I was sort of bored one day. I was home and I was like, I want to do something else. So I looked up climbing in New York City, just like that on Google, and the cliffs at the time. So the cliffs LIC popped up and I went there with my boyfriend at the time. And thankfully I ran into other paraclimbers who were like, well, you seem like you seem like you have a disability. We can climb with you. We can show you what it's like. We can belay you, etc. And that's great because if you've been to a gym for your first time, it's hard if you don't belay, if you don't, boulder, whatever. And so they showed me the ropes literally. And as we were chatting and I was getting to know these people, they were explaining that there are such things as competitions in climbing, and they were training for for the para-nationals. And as a competitive soul myself, I love that. So I decided kind of then and there that was my goal that year, was I was going to go to nationals. And I did 2 months later.
Wow. I mean, and that's so cool. So many people with disabilities do not have that experience. And so that's just amazing, though, that people saw you and were like, hey, we should welcome her in. So many people don't have that experience walking into a gym for the first time.
I know, and that can be really important just because I think if I hadn't had that, I don't know that I'd still be climbing. Because I use auto belays now for training, but auto belays are terrifying sometimes for a beginner. And learning to fall, that took me months to let go of the wall and whatnot. So had that been my very first experience climbing with nothing else, I don't know that I would have done it. So having just that tiny little introduction to the para community at that moment was helpful.
Amazing. And what was the name of the group that was there?
It was 2 people. It was Emily and Denny from currently Para Cliffhangers. At the time, they were ACG climbers.
Which is Adaptive
Climbing Group, yeah. And at the time, Christina Erickson, who now runs the Adaptive Climbers Fest, she was working at the cliffs also, and she's the one who actually approached me. And I climbed with Emily and Denny that day because of her.
Wow, serious, just a stroke of luck. It wasn't even an official meetup or anything. They just happened to all be there.
Yeah, they were training for nationals. That was 2 months later or 3 months later, and they were telling me about it, and I was like, "That sounds great. How do?" And so I did.
That's awesome. And so, did you have a background of doing other competitive sports or competitive other stuff? Because you said you're kind of a competitive soul yourself.
No. So I don't do other sports really. And I'm competitive in that I'll try to win something if I know it's a competition of some kind. But I mean in the way that someone is competitive about arm wrestling. I've never done a comp at anything else, so I've never done another sport. This is sort of the first thing that one, it's the one sport I can do well. And it's the one sport I can compete in where I understand how it works and I can make it work for my body.
Well, and that's a perfect segue to the next question of can you talk about how you have made it work for your body? You know, you kind of laid the groundwork earlier for listeners of what you're dealing with. And so what have you learned over the years for climbing specifically to how to make it work for your body?
I mean, I'm still learning so much about what I can do and what I can't do by way of, well, one, by way of life in general, but also by way of climbing. I thought I had hit sort of a peak and was like, well, that's okay. 11 Bs is where I stop and that's fine. But no, I mean, I had to learn over the years how to do high steps. I had to learn I can kind of heel hook now. I had to learn, balance of some kind. I mean, it's not great, but I had to learn how to do some certain balancy type moves, and I learned how to campus and how to just make my arms take over when my legs can't really do anything. Um, and these were all, I mean, it took me 6 years to learn these skills, but I've learned them. And now, 6 years later, I thought that was it, and there was nothing else to learn, and I sort of just needed to hone in on what I already know. But no, it turns out I'm still able to do things and still able to make my body stronger and more flexible. I stretch a little more now. I started doing the exercise bike, and so my legs have a little more power in them and a little more flexibility and a little more control. I went running yesterday, and that was fun, which is something I don't do because running is hard. But that was fun, and I think I'm learning now that my limit isn't it's not my muscles. It's not that I get pumped fast. Well, it is that I get pumped fast, but I get pumped fast because my aerobic system isn't where it should be. It's not because, you have cerebral palsy and this is hard. Sure, it is. And that is the case, but there's just so much more. There's so much more to learn.
Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit more about that, about the learning, and if you could talk about some of the very specific moves and tactics that you used to train yourself how to be able to do those. I'm thinking heel hooks, maybe toe hooks fall into that. High steps, like those three, and would be a good place to start. Maybe just like core engagement in general. And I'm just listing these off, but I'm assuming that you have some things that are probably coming to mind of like this was a specific critical move in climbing that you had to train yourself how to be able to do it. Does anything come to mind when I say that?
The high stepping is sort of like the game changer or gaining power to use that high step. So I do things for my core, like I'll sometimes I'll lock my feet under something and do sit-ups. And I think the core strength that I've been building has been helping pick up the leg. And then squats and whatnot have helped with the flexibility of the leg. And so I was doing just that for a while, and I thought, okay, well, that's as high up as I can go or as much as I can do for my legs, and that's kind of that. And then I started doing like biking on an exercise bike in the gym for about 30 minutes or so, and just kind of go. I've recently started upping the intensity of it. So now I'm putting a little extra effort into the biking, but I at first was just kind of going for 30 minutes, and the intention was that it would give me an aerobic exercise because, well, running is hard. But I think it inadvertently helped my legs, both with power and with control. And I don't quite know why, but it seems to have. So now I have a little more control. So I'll pick up my leg and it'll sort of hit the hold the first time instead of me having to find it or drag my foot down the wall to find a hold or something of that sort. When I'm chatting outside, I can now sort of place my foot on things and trust that it'll stick on these things. And also, so like when I do a high step, sometimes I'll pick up my foot. Sometimes I'll do this thing. I don't know if you've ever seen it, where I'll grab my foot with my hand, kind of flip it, and stand on the top of my foot. So, or the top of the shoe, I guess. So like where the toe is, like where um the rubber part of the shoe is at the arch of the foot. I'll sort of stand on
Mm-hmm.
that, and that makes it so I can get the high step to my hip instead of just at my knee. Like a natural high step for me is knee height. One of those is a hip height or almost chest height high step.
Mm.
Can I always use it? No, but it's helpful to be able to do that. Uh,
So that's interesting. So it sounds like what you're saying is that you recognized that part of what was your limiting factor in getting these high steps was not only in your leg, but you were lacking some core strength to lift your leg. And so that's why you started working on core. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. It was
Okay, cool.
it also was just something I was noticing that when I did core exercises, just because I wanted a better looking core, my legs also responded. And so I was like, oh, that works. uh, so vanity was helpful there.
Did you say vanity was helpful?
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, it makes sense. We forget sometimes that like it's all connected. We do like arm day and leg day and whatever, but like it's actually all intertwined. So yeah, of course that would help unlock that for you.
Right. And then dead bugs is like the one core exercise I can always rely on to help with the control. It works at the lower core. It makes it so you're also working on coordination. That's the word. Which is a weakness of mine, knowing that when I tell my body to do, it will do,
Well, and on the note of control, is there anything mentally, like phrases that you repeat to yourself or anything that you do in your head, basically, to help make that connection that you've learned works for you over the years?
Well, yeah. So mostly for when I'm climbing, though, not quite when I'm doing a warm up or a workout. Although I guess I do when I do a workout. But when I'm climbing, mostly it's my little mantra is one more hold, and then I'm done. Or one more hold, and to whatever my goal is, right? So if I'm treading, one more hold to the anchors, one more hold to this, one more hold to that. Um, and that can mean a hand, it can mean a foot. Just get there, right? So that I'm not quite thinking about like what does it look like, how am I doing? I'm thinking about the continuous motion and the continuous movement of just doing things. Um,
And do you do anything specifically to target a different body part? Like, would you ever talk to yourself of like, engage the quad, engage the glute, like that kind of very specific stuff, or is it really more whole body?
I I don't I don't do that specifically just because it's not listening to me anyway half the time. No, if I am being that specific, it's because I'm in the middle of a comp and I'm like, I need this leg to move here and I need it to move there now. Or I'm like on a trad
Mm-hmm.
climb and I'm in a weird spot and I just want to like get a piece in. And to do that, I need to get a higher foot so I can move up a little bit.
Yeah, well, and you've mentioned trad climbing a couple of times now. So let's transition to that. I want to hear more. I know that's been a relatively new thing for you, both trad and outdoors, right? So kind of just take us back to the beginning. I know you started climbing indoors, obviously, because of the competitions. You got lucky that one day with some other paraclimbers there in the gym. So how did you get outside?
Well, that's fun. Trad was one of those things where I kept saying, well, I'm never going to do that. It's one of those things you tell yourself because it looks hard. And it looks so advanced. I remember going out. My first time outside wasn't even with a group; it was with a friend of mine. We went to Power Lines in New York, and I mean, he had to try to put up the routes for us, and I was like, "What is that?" And then he explained what he was doing, and he showed me the pieces, like his rack, basically. Showed me how to put things into the wall, and I got really excited about it. But then at some point, I don't know, I don't remember if it was that year or maybe the year after or something, but a friend of mine died in the gunks trad climbing. She had like just gotten good enough that she felt comfortable going out with someone who wasn't like a big group or wasn't in a big group, and her pieces popped and she hit a ledge and died.
Oh.
And
Mm-hmm.
it scared me enough where I was like, "Ooh, this woman was able-bodied. If that can happen to her, then what right do I have to be trying this kind of thing?" Because
Yeah.
like I mean, yes, her pieces popped, but still she fell, right? Um, and so I just sort of gave up on trad entirely and was like, I'm not doing that ever. I mean, I'll do outdoor climbing maybe, but that's it. And I just stopped trying. And on top of that, just outdoor climbing is hard. Walking is hard. Getting to the crag is ridiculous sometimes. And it just didn't seem worth the effort if that was the probable outcome. So I kind of...
And that was like, what year was that?
2020.
Okay, yeah.
So that was kind of that. I mean, I know more about it now to know, like, she might have been in a weird situation anyway, where she was with someone who wasn't listening to her needs and yada yada. Like, there was more to it than just she fell and her pieces popped. But still, I didn't know that at the time, and it scared me. So, I put that on pause for years, and then I started working at Movement Kiwanis, where I met Wilder, who also works there. And I was chatting with him about competitions and my climbing and whatnot, and he was like, "Man, that's wild. There should be a documentary about you." And I was like, "I would love a documentary," but that didn't take him seriously, like, at all, because why would I? Only to find out that he was in fact serious, and because he's a filmmaker, and so yes, he can do this kind of thing. And so he texted me at some point later on, "So when are we starting?" And I was like, "What?" And we met up a couple times. We talked about what that would mean. We talked about outdoor projects because apparently they gain more traction than just competition sometimes, unless you're, Yanya, but I am not. So, and I was like, well, I've always wanted to climb Everest, and I had just spoken to the all-black crew who had climbed Everest at the American Alpine Club. They're called Full Circle Everest, I think it was. Well, Full Circle something. Anyway, it was one of those times where I was like, I would love to do that because that looks cool. And so I looked into it, but we as people with disabilities are not allowed to climb Everest. Like, literally, it's illegal. So
yeah, that's like a whole other episode. But yeah,
no, I know, it's the whole thing. And I was like, I'm not going to shell out thousands of dollars to fight the legal system so I can climb a mountain I don't really want to climb, because it's ice climbing anyway and mountaineering, and it's a whole different thing. So that went out the window kind of fast. But we were talking, and he was like, "Well, there's always LCAP," and I was like, actually, that sounds great, except I cannot in my lifetime climb 514. Like, there's no way, and that's just not possible, right? I don't, and I still, as good as I'm getting at climbing, I still believe it's not possible, but that's not the point right now. So he goes, "Well, yeah, but you could aid climb it," and I was like, "What?" And here we are with aid climbing. Aid climbing is when you're doing normal trad or normal sport climbing, except now you have ladders or hooks or something that you're using that isn't just the wall and the rope and the pro that you put in to help you get up the wall. Like, the goal of aid climbing is to just finish the climb. It's what I like aid climbing. It's slow, but it's fun. And it means that I can do a big wall that has 514 climbs on it. So we decided that, and by we, I mean I kind of decided that I'd do Lurking Fear on El Capitan. And it's an ongoing project I'm still training for because outdoor climbing is hard and trad climbing is hard. And I had to, part of the I want to do LCAP was, well, I now have to learn how to trad, because the alternative is to just follow for 19 pitches, but also because if I can trad LCAP, even if I'm aiding it, I'd be the one person with cerebral palsy to do that. So there's that.
Yeah.
So that's the main point of the doc. And so I had to learn how to trad. I had to learn how to aid kind of at the same time to get this going. And so I was focusing on the aid climbing aspect of it, where I put some pieces in and yard on them so I could put my ladders on. But I thought for a while that maybe I should switch it up a little bit and focus just on the trad, because I understand aid climbing enough to know that I can just do it when I need to. But trad climbing by itself is still terrifying to me. And so I wanted more experience doing that before I went back to practicing aid. So I spend a lot of time now trad climbing, or trying to trad climb.
And did you say Wilder? Is that your boyfriend?
No. He's
okay.
No, my boyfriend doesn't work at the gym, but I do climb a lot with
Okay.
him. Um,
So this is a
this is just a
friend
friend.
named
Yeah.
Wilder.
Yeah. His name is Wilder Troxel, Troxell.
Okay, cool. And you met him at the gym.
I met him at Gowanus when we were both working front desk one day.
And that's a gym in New York City?
Yep. It's now a movement gym.
Okay.
Previously the Cliffs. It's in Gowanus, Brooklyn.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, it's one of the sister gyms to like the Movement LIC gym and
Mm-hmm.
Movement Harlem and Movement the rest. Um,
Yeah, okay. Cool. Well, that's neat. Okay, so I love though when people do start indoors and then get outside because it is just like such it is the same but different.
it really is.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you've noticed changing about yourself as a climber or even just as a person since you've been climbing outside?
I mean, so physically, when I'm climbing, I've learned that I can do things like I can kind of smear now. I can use tiny little feet outside.
Mm.
I also learned I don't like dihedrals because that's sort of the movement I don't really have yet, or I do have it, but very minimally. Like that's when I say I'm not flexible, that's kind of what I mean. Um, but I can smear on smaller feet. I can grab smaller hands, kind of. I've started hangboarding, so that's getting a little better. Um, I'm learning that I don't just because something is hard and just because something is scary does not mean it's impossible. It just means it's hard and scary. And sometimes when I'm on a climb where I'm like all but actually crying out of fear, um, the alternative really, not the alternative, but the solution there really is sometimes just to sit there and calm down and then maybe do the move I was crying about or come down, you know. But to not do that in the middle of the emotion, just kind of to like wait a second and let it pass and then see what happens and see where I'm at.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm learning I can work through fear in that way. I'm learning I can make a lot more work outside than I thought. I get away with movements that I didn't quite know would work, but they do.
Why do you think that's different outside than, I mean, because you've been competing since like 2019 at this point. You have plenty of experience climbing indoors on lots of different routes set by lots of different people. So what's different about outside that has made things work for you that you couldn't do inside?
Well, here's the thing, right? So you climb in competitions, you climb inside, they're all kind of the same. And that doesn't mean the routes are literally the same. It means the feeling is kind of the same where, you know, they're plastic holds. Competitions especially, the holds are almost always juggy anyway. There might be pinches, there might be slopers, but to some extent they are juggy. So I can go into it with the expectation of like, oh yeah, that'll be a big foot because it was a hand, right? In a gym, I'm climbing things that have to do that help me train for my comps, and my comps are on long, juggy, burly climbs. So I'm sort of looking for climbs like that, and I'm not really experimenting with like the 11s that make you really think. So I'm not really doing the tiny, tiny feet on a 511C, you know, or the weird movements that an 11B might give you.
And so is that part of because that's the route setters for your particular competition category? That's typically how they set for you.
Exactly. They set in a way, and I mean that's not to say that they don't make us think that they do. Otherwise, I'd have to.
Sure. Yeah.
They make us think, and of course the climbs are burly, and I mean I'm only but so strong, right? So I can and I've never topped the finals route, so there's plenty to learn there. But it's a different style. It's a different kind of climbing. It's a different mindset. It's not quite like, oh, okay, I have to figure out this puzzle. It's can I reach the next hold if I pull hard enough, right? The hold that I know is right there. It's just a matter of pulling or pushing hard with my feet. It's sometimes there's an aspect of like, I need to cross my foot forward or do some weird hand foot thing or bring my foot to my stomach and do a high step that way. But usually it's, can I pull this move? And if not, then I'll probably fall. But that's usually it. Whereas outdoors, the burly climbs are the 9s usually. or I guess the overhung climbs, the quote unquote easier climbs, the 5.3s, 5.4s, those are the ones that you have to be really careful about, because those are the ones that are going to have the feet where people, and by people I just mean people who say it's a 5.3, assume that you can walk. So a slab should be quote unquote easy for you, and that's therefore a warm up. Or they assume that you can do a lateral movement with your legs, so a dihedral isn't the worst thing in the world. So calling it a 5.4 would be fair, right? For me, that feels like a 12 because I don't have the lateral movement in my legs. For a while, couldn't flex my ankles. So smearing felt impossible. And standing on a smear on tiny little ledges, especially in the gunks, God, was awful. And I didn't trust it. And I remember I went to Zion to do a climb before Moonlight Buttress and could not do the climb because the end of a pitch ended on a slab. And while I could get my foot onto it, I didn't trust that it would hold just because of the angle of the wall. Now because that's what outdoor climbing is, I've been working a lot on ankle flexion and smearing and trusting that the tiny hands I have are fine. But that took a while, and it took me seeing that there wasn't really another option unless I 8 climbed it, brought out my ladders. But I'm stubborn and really wanted to just free things. So I'm sort of at a point now where I can look at a climb and go, I could probably get my foot on that tiny foot if it's there, or really if I need to, I could high step something and get out of it that way. But
because you've done your bicycling and your core work to be able to high step. So I'm hearing something else really beautiful here when you talk about grades that it's like a tone of voice that I don't usually hear from people, because it sounds like you've just had this door opened up for so much more variety of climbing than you could get indoors. But you're also, what I'm hearing is letting go of the grading system and just experiencing a 5.3 and a 5.4 for the beauty that it is. And because it offers you a challenge, not trying to just poo-poo, whatever, like it's just a 5.4. I'm not even going to like that. There's no way that could be fun. And I think that's really beautiful.
Well, that's sort of what I'm trying to do. I'll admit it's still hard because.
Oh, girl, I got you. I know.
Because we all go through that phase where we're like, or that thought process where we're like, yeah, but it's a 5.3 and I couldn't even do that, and everyone's going to think I can't climb. Like I still have a hard time doing group trips because I'm like, but they're going to be on the 5.8s and I'm going to be on the 3s and they're going to think I can't climb and I'm you know what I mean? Like,
and you're like, they don't know that I'm like a podiumed climber. Like,
right. They're going to be like, well, why are you a podium climber if you can't even get up a 5.3, and probably no one's thinking this, but at the same time,
No, of course not. But you are in your mind. No, I get that.
Right. And therefore the thought is real. And
yes.
It's taking a lot of me actually doing the climbs to be like, oh, actually, yeah, no, this is a 5.3, but to me it feels like a 12 because this movement is not possible in this way. So I have to find a way around it, or I have to do it the way it's intended, the way people think it should be done. But doing it that way is just so much harder for me. I have this sort of idea.
Yes.
Where I might get in contact with the Gunks people, like the people who run the Gunks app, and pitch to them the idea of adding paragrades.
Yeah.
Because like a 5.3 to me is not a 5.3. I mean, a 5.3 to me and a 5.3 to you are very different. And I think there's something to be said for like bringing a paraclimber outside and looking at them and being like, well, actually, that's more like a 6 for you,
Right.
And not because of like, oh, you can't climb, but more because of the way your body works, right?
Well, and then we start to get into just the tricky business of paraclimbing having so many categories. Like, it would be so tricky, right, to be able to say like, well, if this is a 5.6 for a RP climber, someone who has reduced range and power, but is it the same grade for someone who is an AL climber who has a prosthetic leg? Like, what's their grade? Then like everyone gets their own grade. And at a certain point, I kind of love how like the thought process that you're going for of just like maybe the grades just don't matter. Maybe like,
Right.
yeah. The other thing that it makes me think of is that, like, for you, as you've said several times, walking is difficult for you. And I can say from seeing you at competitions, seeing you walk around, it looks harder than climbing when I watch you climb. And so like a 5'3" and a 5'4" is closer to walking for a lot of people. And so like it makes sense that that would be harder for you, because the closer to walking, the harder it is.
Right, exactly. I did a climb the other day in Rumney that was like a 5'9", and the actual climb, like up until the last clip, it was fine. But then there was the end, so the very last clip to the bolts, where it ended on what was basically a slab, and it was like a standing walk, like a standing slab. Like basically you're just walking. And to get to the cliffs, you had to stand straight up and clip for what is for me above my head because I'm short. And I looked at it, and I did the hard part of the move, which was to get your foot really high and get over the lip. I got over the lip, looked at the slab part of it itself, and was like, no, there's no way. And I bailed. And I bailed not because the movement was hard, but I bailed because I didn't know that if I stood on that, I wouldn't fall backwards. Because it's like slab does that, where you're leaning in. My body will just decide that, nope, we're going this way now, and I'll slip or I'll fall or something. And I do not trust that I wouldn't like hurt myself standing and falling backwards, right? Just falling off a ledge, basically. But also it got tricky because it was over my head. I can't really do things standing straight up with my arms over my head unless I'm holding on to something. Like that's just a weird it's a weird form of balance that I just don't have. Or I do have it, but it's hard, right? Like I don't trust it as much.
It's not your best skill.
Yeah. So that was the end of the climb, and I just could not finish it.
Well, I hear that from a lot of paraclimbers, and I've certainly experienced that myself, of having the one move that is just like, for everybody else, for other people, it would be a crux. It would be the hardest part, but it doesn't totally shut you down. And I think that can sometimes, it's just the degree of how much your physical constraints, we all have them in our bodies, but sometimes it makes things more difficult, and sometimes it's just like, it's just a no-go. Like, it's just not happening. Yeah.
There are just some things I'm learning that there's a difference between like, oh, I can't do this yet, but I'll figure it out. And no, that's just not actually possible.
Yeah.
And I put a lot of things into no, that's not actually possible, even though they don't belong there. And I'm learning now what those things are. But there are still things that are not possible, like I don't quite know what exactly they are. Like maybe walking up a slab without hands at all is not possible. Maybe, I don't know. Because my balance is just that bad. Or it's not that it's bad, it's more that it's not trustworthy. I don't know that I won't just randomly fall.
Right.
Because I randomly fall all the time. And on flat ground, that's fine. On a climb where it slopes in a weird way, no, that is not okay.
Well, and that's also why it's smart for you to come down. It wasn't just pure fear. Like, falling is a skill, and you said you haven't done it very much outside. So like, that's smart to not take scary falls that are like surprising to you, that you can't be fully prepared for until you've practiced that skill and you feel fine doing that. Like, that's not being fearful. That's just being smart. You need to learn that skill. Right.
I think that, and just knowing that if I need to bail, I can do that.
Yeah.
Bailed on a 3 because I didn't trust the movement. I'm going to go back and do this 3 now because I now understand how to. It was a lateral movement. I couldn't move my leg straight across, and they wanted you to get your leg across to then rock onto it. And I did not trust that. Like, I was not doing that.
I've heard that from other climbers with neurological conditions, that the rocking over on the leg can be like really tricky.
It is. It really, I don't, well, one, getting the leg out there is hard, and then rocking onto it is just another challenge. And I don't know if it's because, like, to do that, I'm signaling the leg to do something and it's overfiring, so it's getting stiff, so then it's hard to rock, or if it's not getting the connection at all.
Mm-hmm.
Not the connection, the command. So rocking over just isn't happening because it's not being
Mm-hmm.
told to. You know what I mean? Like I haven't figured out what's happening with it. I just know that I do not trust it.
Well, and that seems to be the way that you work is like you figure out what the problem is in your body. Like, is the signal not getting there or is the signal confused? And then you can kind of like workshop it from there, but you haven't quite sussed this one out. What is the miscommunication that's happening? But you'll get there.
Right.
I believe in you. You've done so much.
I mean, I hope so.
You have. I mean, the amount of things that you've accomplished since 2019, since randomly starting in a climbing gym, is just amazing. And in the little bit of time left, I was hoping that you could talk about this kind of, I guess, like the unforeseen benefits that you've experienced because of climbing, and especially, I think you said it was the outdoor climbing has helped. Some of your disability, the things that used to be harder are easier now.
Yeah, happily. Because of the fact that I now have to train differently for outdoor climbing, for example, I have to like work on leg flexibility or control and all that jazz, right? It's helped my walking, and it's helped my walking a lot. I can walk. What used to happen is I would walk a bit and it would hurt my spine somehow. I think what was happening is that I was dropping onto the foot, like the forward foot, so I'd move and drop my foot, and all my weight would sort of like send the shock up my spine.
Mm.
But since I'm working on like strength and the control and just doing that kind of thing, I think that the back leg is now able to support the front leg a little better, and it's easier now to like stop that from to stop that shock from happening. That's just one example, right? Um, I walk a little faster, a little more confidence. I'm running now, and I mean I could run for a while, but
That's amazing. Do you have to use your arm crutches at all?
that's the thing. I don't. My balance has
Wow.
gotten good enough that
What?
I can reliably walk with the cane for a while. Before I'm like, and this is hard. I walk without it sometimes just for fun. I do it with a person around, but I can. I don't run with the cane. When I went running yesterday, I left the cane home.
Wow.
Just we didn't go far, but I
Mm-hmm.
did leave it home.
That's amazing.
I can walk. I mean, I can walk for ages now. Well, maybe it's not ages to you guys, but for me, it's a while to be able to walk for 40 minutes at a time or more. I mean, I walked from Brooklyn to Queens the other day, other way around, Queens to Brooklyn, just because I could.
And like, what did it used to be? Like, how many minutes could you walk with just a cane before?
We'll say a block or two.
Wow. Yeah.
At one time before I'm like, and that was hard. And no matter what the speed was, I walk at a speed now that sort of mimics an able-bodied speed, and a normal non-New Yorker able-bodied speed.
Kentucky, come hang out in Kentucky. I bet you walk faster than most of us.
I walk fast for someone like me.
Mm-hmm.
I walk still kind of slow for a New Yorker, but I can get places pretty
Cool.
quickly. Which is fun. I can, I guess what I'm saying is my walking really, really improved because of the stuff I have to do for climbing, and it's wild. I mean, I'm impressed with it. I'm thinking about getting a bike somehow, and I'm still workshopping ways of how that would work. Because I think the biking is so helpful that I want to be able to do that more often. Like I want to be able to bike from my place to, I don't know, maybe the gym even one day, which is quite a while, but why not, right? It's things like that have just been so helpful. And the arcing I do every so often when I remember to, has been helping with the flexibility also. I forgot to mention that earlier, but arcing is like when you climb up and down the route for, let's say, 30 minutes or so, or any amount of time. You're on a set of routes for 30 minutes or so, and you climb up, you climb down, you do a bunch of drills, you stay on the wall for 30 minutes. And I think that climbing down has been stretching out my hips a little bit, which has been helping. But yeah, I mean, just these little things that I didn't think of because they weren't really told to me.
And do you experience less just overall back pain or just random pain? Is that reduced at all?
Yeah, I mean, I can I still get back pain, but it's not quite as bad. It's more manageable. I do get tightness in my left thigh. I think I like overused it at some point and don't know where, when, or how. But that's more to do with CP and the fact that my muscle is just tight and I can't loosen it myself. So That's more a matter of like massaging and being intentional with the recovery stuff that I do for it. But yeah, I mean, back pain is a thing that I'm gonna have, or sometimes like my right arm will go out randomly because it does that, but it's not because I'm walking too much. It's just that kind of happens, and that's just what it is. I have days that I call CP days where it's just where my body does not listen to me at all. Those are happening less, I think.
That's amazing.
And when they do happen, I can still move. Like I still trust that my legs will listen. I can still do things. It's still fine,
It doesn't totally take you out.
Right. Like it used to. Like it used to be where I'm just home all day because it's just not working.
I think that a lot of people with disabilities, and especially people who are active with disabilities, are kind of like constantly running our own experiments in our bodies, and it's always an N of one. Like, so we never really know why. It's like, I don't know.
Right. It's hard to figure it out.
Yeah, but what you know is that it's helping, and outdoor climbing in particular seems to be helping you, and maybe you don't know why, but you know that it is.
Right, exactly. And I mean, it's been great so far. The training is going fine. The training is going great. It's sometimes fun. Training. I mean, I like training. I get bored of like arcing, staying on a route for 30 minutes at a time. It's so boring. But hangboarding is kind of fun though. Finding out my grip is stronger than I thought. And strength training is always fun. And then it helps, it helps other things in life, and I feel better. I feel more competent as a climber. And just more able than I was. And so a week or two off actual climbing before, with still some workouts in between isn't going to be the end of the world. I can't wait for the next comps to come up because I just need to see how this works in a competition. Am I truly as loose as I think I am? Am I truly as in control as I think I am? That's sort of how I can tell,
Because this will be the first round of competitions that you've competed in since doing all the outdoor stuff?
Exactly.
Oh, right on. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm excited too. I mean, we haven't seen each other in a long time because I haven't been at some of the comps recently. But yeah, hell yeah, I'm excited to see what happens as you continue this experiment.
Yeah, me too. I like that I'm surprised it's going this well, and I like that it's going this well. And I'm sort of just taking it for what it is, I guess. And just really enjoying what's happening. I like that I can rely on my body again, or rely on my body at all. I know that when I walk down the street, I'm probably fine. And even if I trip on my foot, which happens anyway, it'll be fine. I can feel that my ankles are moving when I tell them to. I can feel that it's not as hard of a drop, so I can walk a little further, a little better. And that's just, I mean, now the next step is to hike better or to hike more so that when I go climbing, I can do that without getting so tired. It's all this movement and all this improvement just means that I'm finding more stuff to do and more stuff to work on. And the challenges are harder because,
yes,
that's how challenges work. And that's how like next levels work. It's sort of like, I think of it as like a game, right? Like I'm unlocking levels, unlocking new abilities, and figuring out what to do with them. And they're helping me find more challenges and find more levels to unlock. And it's a beautiful cycle, and I like it.
Well, and speaking of outdoor climbing, are we finally going to get you at the Adaptive Climbers Fest?
Yes, actually, this year.
Yes!
I've already got my ticket, but I'm doing it as an instructor.
Oh, cool.
I'm doing a clinic on aid climbing for paraclimbers.
Oh, okay. Right on.
My intended audience is people who are neurologically challenged, but obviously anyone who can fit in the class can come. Because, part of the reason a lot of us, and by us, I mean neuro climbers, aren't outdoors climbing is because the hands and feet just are not there. But what if we had ladders? What if we had things that we could use to get us to the next hand, right? Or to get us up the wall? Imagine how many things are unlocked that way. And it's just, I don't know. When I found out about aid climbing, I thought it was wild that I didn't know about it beforehand, because it's just like the perfect way for us to do things while while we're still learning the outdoor ropes, and we're still learning like how the rock feels and how climbing feels. It's crazy to me that it wasn't already a thing.
Well, and then if we can let go of the notion of that grades are universal, and that, it's perfectly acceptable that people use aid. All kinds of people use aid on climbs, 513 and higher. And so if we can let go of that notion that a grade is universal, then anybody should be able to use aid on any climb that is their personal 513.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or even if a climb isn't necessarily, like, it could be the easiest climb they've ever done. If they feel like bringing out a ladder, they should be able to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes all you need is an extra foot, right? Literally just an extra foot. You put a ladder in, now you have that foot because you have a rung. Sometimes you need to get a little higher, put a ladder in, reach your hand up a little higher. It's just like, it's remarkable that I didn't know this existed before I started outdoor climbing. And I only found out about it because I wanted to do a big wall.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't we told about it? Right? Like, why isn't it a tool in our toolbox?
I love that, Melissa. That's awesome. I will see you there.
Yeah, if you can pop in, you can see it.
I love that. The other thing that I'm going to look up after we hang up is that I don't know the history of the gunks. Like, I don't know how early it started being climbed and graded. But, a lot of the places that were climbed really early, some of the first places in the U.S. to climb, their grading scale was set on, like, imagining that climbs would only ever get up to 5.9s. And so it's possible that some of those things that you're on a 5.3, like maybe now, if it were graded like last year, it might have been graded like a 5.6 or 7.
Well, that's the new guidebooks sort of have better, like, have updated grades, sort of. It's kind of why I'm like, I know it would be hard because categories exist, but in paraclimbing, it would be like to have a sort of an idea, like, oh, for a neuroclimber said that this is this, so maybe I with my working legs think it's this, or I with my missing leg but two working hands. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that would like, that's sort of where my idea goes, in that, like, the grades are sort of arbitrary anyway. A 5.3, a 5.6, they're all kind of the same to me, because maybe I can do it, maybe I can't.
Mm-hmm. What I could imagine happening, like, very realistically, on Mountain Project or the various apps, you said there's one for the gunks, is that there's always a comment section where people say this is, as height is the thing that always comes up, is as a short climber, this one was really hard. Or occasionally, as a tall climber, I got really squunched up at the crux and this was really hard. So it's like very common in the comment section to see people commenting about how it makes the climb harder or easier based on your height. And maybe in the future, as paraclimbing and adaptive climbing is becoming more recognized, maybe we will begin to just see that happening in the comment section, that people could comment things like, as an RP climber, I thought,
right.
As an AU2 climber, I thought, and like, maybe that will become part of our lexicon as a climbing community, which would be so fucking cool.
I know, it really is fun to see where climbing is going and see how people are starting to think about the climb that they're talking about and the way that they're doing things. I mean, it's really fun, it's fun to think of what can happen in the future. I mean, now that we have paraclimbing in the Olympics, who knows what's going to happen? There's more, like, we're sort of on more radars, basically, right? People know we're there. They know we exist. They know we're in the gym. We're outside. We're inside. We're kind of everywhere. And I mean, my goal for, like, this clinic, but also for my LCAP project or my climbing in general, is to show the outdoors is ours also. The indoors is ours also. It's like, we shouldn't be hiding or afraid or whatever. We should be out there making these changes, going around and saying, oh, to me, this climb feels like this grade, and not feeling like we're wrong for thinking a 5.3 feels like a 5.12,
I think that's a perfect place to end. I know that we're over time anyway, so I know I got to let you go at some point, but it's been a really good conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Everybody Climbs. I'm your host and adaptive sports journalist, Emily Chen Newton. You can reach out to me about the show on Instagram with the handle EveryBD_Climbs. That's every, then the letter B and the letter D, Climbs on Instagram. This podcast is presented across Plugtone audio platforms. Thank you, Chris Hampton, for being game to make all this happen. Now, as I've said from the beginning, this is a collaborative project. We only have one more episode left with me as your host, and then it's time to pass it on to another climber with a microphone. If you or someone you know is interested in being that climber, we can find you a microphone. Find me on Instagram with EveryBD Climbs. That's all for now. Climb on, climb strong, and remember, every body climbs.